Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking.
Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Keith Haney. Today's episode is one that every parent, advocate, and entrepreneur needs to hear. We're joined by Reasa Selph, award-winning business strategist, founder of successful marketing agency, and a passionate advocate for patient safety. In December 2023, Reasa's son, 11-year-old Nicholas, was sent home from Dallas ER despite showing signs of sepsis. Just 2 days later, he collapsed in a septic shock and spent over a month in intensive care, undergoing multiple surgeries to save his life. Now 12, Nicholas lives with permanent injuries. Reasa has turned her family's fight into a mission. She's here to share her story, the warning signs every parent should know, and how to advocate fiercely when the system fails. At the same time, she continues to empower small businesses through her agency, proving resilience can fuel both personal and professional growth. Let's dive into this powerful conversation. We welcome her to the podcast. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
So good to have you on. Well, we're going to begin with my favorite question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Trust your gut. Something that I think we forget a lot, but it's probably one of the most powerful things as a human that we have.
Yeah, and especially probably in your situation, you got to trust your gut because sometimes it's telling you something's just not right here, right?
Yeah. Relationships, business, healthcare, whatever, just especially a mom gut. I mean, it's mom guts are pretty good. So
Right. So let's dive into your story. Tell us what happened with your son Nicholas and why his sepsis was missed at the ER.
um so one, I'd like to start with saying I don't feel like it was missed. I feel like it was ignored.
Okay.
And they had all of the information. They just chose not to use it. So we had gone to the ER on December 14th. Nicholas had the flu. It was very basic. He needed some fluids. He just needed to be hydrated. So we get home and he's starting to feel better. We even do some volunteer work. And then on the 22nd, he just really regressed and couldn't really figure out why. So we watched him on the 22nd. On the 23rd, he could barely walk. He just, you knew something was wrong. And so we decided to go back we went to a Methodist of South Lake. So it's part of the large Methodist group here in North Texas. And we went back to them because, it was a trusted hospital in our area. And we were just there 2 weeks before and we thought, they'll have all of his information. So we're there a little less than 2 hours. And looking back on hindsight, I have some, very good 20/20 vision with that. But he couldn't pee. And I asked the nurse, I said, she said, can you give us urine sample, Nicholas? And he said, I can't pee. So my ask to her was, can we still get the lab work? And she says, I think she was a little frustrated. She's like, well, let me talk to the doctor. And she comes back and she says, don't worry about it. The doctor said it's a virus. Y'all go home. So we go home and we trust the hospital, right? So I'm paying and things that you would all think it would all be normal. Well, he slept most of the day, the 24th, and then the 25th, our oldest son was home from school, and he's like, "Mom, I gotta wake him up, right? My gut tells me I need to wake him up, and plus I want to open my gifts." So we got him up, and he could barely walk down the stairs, and he kept saying how his arm and stuff was hurting and how he felt dizzy, and I think he was, like, saying dizzy confused. So I said, "Let me take his blood pressure." Took it, and it was so low, I thought the machine was broken, and so I'm putting new batteries in it, and I turned and looked at him, and he was yellow, and so I thought, "Gosh, is my mind playing tricks on, like, what's happening here?" So we call our pediatrician at home, and I said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but we really need some help. I don't know what to do." She said, "Take him to Cook's right now," and so that's what we did. So that's how it started. And when we arrived at Cook's, I think Nicholas knew something was wrong, but as a mom, I couldn't really capture that in my head. But because he said, "Please don't leave me." And I was, "Gosh, I'm not leaving until you leave." And I was committed to that. And I had no idea that it would be almost 40 days. But so we go in the wheelchair, and they take his blood pressure, and I can't remember if it was his temperature. There was something else. And that's when she said, "We're activating sepsis protocol." And all of these people came in and just started taking over. So there was 10 or 15 medical professionals in there. That's when I knew we were going to have a problem.
Wow. So tell us, for those who don't know, what is sepsis? Just to kind of.
Sepsis is, back when I was a kid, they would call it like a blood infection, right? So it's where your immune system is overcompensating, and it for an infection that's in your essentially blood. And so it's your organs start to shut down, and eventually you will die if you don't get what you need, which is antibiotics. Um, so as we're there, Nicholas, they put him on a ventilator. That was really tough. He vomited a pint of blood. There was a moment where he said, "Do you see Jesus as lamb in the corner?" And I was like, "Not today, you don't." And he would say things like, "It's okay if I die." So there was a lot happening, and there was a lot of days they didn't know how he was going to be okay, because CDC doesn't have a lot of kids that have survived septic shock. Um, and so it was a lot of tough days. So probably on about day, I don't know, 12-ish, um, as I felt things maybe have calmed down a little bit, I asked one of the doctors, "How do we go from we were just at an ER 48 hours before to you put my son on a ventilator when we got here?" And he said, "I want to show you something." And he showed me the records from the visit on the 23rd. It turned out that Nicholas, his kidneys were already failing, his heart was already in distress, his liver and kidney functions were grossly off already, and they didn't tell us any of that.
Do you know why?
Well, the hospital has never once come out to acknowledge um, that they ignored it. I have some suspicions, and just, I don't know, a week or two ago, we learned that at another hospital in the same network or the same group, another young man, but he passed away and had pretty much all of the same signs and symptoms. He passed away on day 2, so the same as Nicholas, but Nicholas just ended up on a ventilator. Um, s so I think it's something. I have no idea why they would not tell us.
So, as a parent who's maybe hearing this, what are some early signs that people should be aware of if they're dealing with sepsis?
low blood pressure, respiratory rate being high, abnormal labs, recently ill. So if they've had the flu, a few weeks before, or if they're immune compromised, inability to urinate is another big deal. But just trust your gut and push if they're not activating sepsis protocol. It's a simple blood test and antibiotics to solve the problem.
You must have gone up, felt like you were fighting a big beast and trying to fight the system. What was that like trying to go up against this behemoth of a system you were dealing with?
So we're still going through it. It has been, I almost feel like David and Goliath. I mean, they have all the money, they have all the resources, they are fairly litigious. So they're doing, I think they have 25 open cases right now. So they're doing this professionally. And I I'm fighting back because it's the right thing to do. Um, but it's been a lot. I'm making phone calls and showing up to senators' offices. Like we want change. This should not happen.
What kind of changes are you seeking to see come about because of this?
Well, one, we want legislation change. So a mandatory sepsis protocol. I was just on the phone to one of the senators' offices about the regulatory agencies that we trust. There's no insight into them, and it almost feels as if the medical board is really focusing on protecting licenses versus patients, which is the opposite of their mission and what our taxpaying dollars go to. So we want transparency into that, but we also want accountability, not only for what they've done to Nicholas, but the other families. And they the hospitals should not get the luxury of just making it so complex for someone to fight back that they get away with it over and over. Like, this should not be a line item on a P&L of a cost of doing business of people that get sick or they die because they didn't do their part.
So the system broke down in many ways. What would you say the first breakdown that you ran across as a family in the system?
Um, the the first breakdown, I think, they received 2 federal violations for Nicholas's visit, and there's been no accountability for it. I mean, the government comes in and says, "We regulate you," and there's no real consequence for them. So no one's taking it. Kind of reminds me of a child that gets no consequence. They say, "Hey, don't do that," but they get to keep doing it over and over because nothing happens. So that's where I think the biggest breakdown is, in the fact that and we have to fight so hard to get what we should be getting.
As you look back at the process you went through with Nicholas, what records do you think anyone who's going into the hospital with their child needs to make sure they keep track of? And how do you advocate as someone who's now advocating for families and families or medical records? What should families be doing to not find themselves in a situation that you found yourself in?
Well, I think I may get a lot of pushback on this, but record those conversations when you're in there with the doctor because you may forget something or whatever. So that's very helpful. But also ask for those labs before you leave. Ask to have those documents printed. In worst case, download them from my chart as soon as you're done, but hold on to them. They may prove to be invaluable later. But we now keep everything on a link tree and it's very organized as far as, what happened and when, because now we're going to back and forth from Texas to Minnesota to the Mayo Clinic to get Nicholas hopefully better. So it's record and keep all your documents, keep them organized. It makes it a lot easier.
So after he was admitted back to the hospital, what I see he had several surgeries. What was his process of healing when he went back in the hospital when they discovered it was sepsis?
There was a lot. He ended up getting septic arthritis and a couple of bone infections. So the surgeries he did receive, the major ones were joint washouts. And Nicholas just turned 13 about a month ago, and all he wants to do is play football. He's right at 6'3", 13 years old, and so the washouts are going to be something that we have to deal with for a long time. But it was right hip and right wrist, 2 times each. So, though the recovery was pretty difficult, especially for the hip, because he had to be able to get up and walk. And so not only did he have atrophy in his muscles from the sudden amount of weight loss because he couldn't eat, now he also had to walk. And so that was a pretty tough recovery for those. He ended up with dress syndrome, and he had so many things, appendicitis. It was pretty gnarly deal.
So how is your family dealing with the emotional and legal pressures of challenging an institution like you just had to?
It has not been easy. We've spent over $1 million trying to fight back, trying to get Nicholas health care that he needs. We've lost friends. I've lost clients. It's been a lot. I mean, it's for me emotionally. I've had to go through therapy. Nicholas had to go through therapy. My husband. It's one of the ultimate betrayals, right? So you go to a hospital that you trust, and you find that out, and then to know that it could have been solved with them just following protocol, um, makes it difficult. And now that we've met this other family and their son died, and I know how similar it is, it brings back a lot, and it's very humbling.
Where do families go? I'm sure you have to have some kind of support system. Where do you find a support system when you're going through things like this?
I I don't know that there is a real support system because most people don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But we are starting some initiatives to help families, um, to to ensure that there are people that can support them, that can help them fight back. But you're going to have to lean on those around you and just let that mama bear come out.
Well, I commend you for your courage. I can imagine when it's your child and you're in the middle of it, this is the hardest thing you do. So, do you have support with you now that's kind of coming alongside you guys?
Yeah, we've rallied some support not only from other families around us that have had similar issues, but also working with some of our lawmakers in Austin, working with them on how are we going to set up for the next legislative session and how do we get change. And so that's been very beneficial. I think it's helping me walk through some of that, but I think it'll hopefully give me a little closure.
So, for people who are hearing this and they want to support you, know more about your cause, where can they connect with you and find out more?
So we have a website. It's actually being redone, but it is something is still up, but it's resaspieces.com. And that has the story. We're adding how to advocate, where to go if you're in that situation, things that you need to do. We want to give this to other families because no one tells you that you need to file these reports and do these things to get action. So,
Wow. You're in my prayers. Again, this is it's a heartbreaking story to know that
yes,
the system failed you so and your family so epically. So we just can keep and continue to lift you up in our prayers.
we appreciate that.
So I love to ask my guests this question. I'm just curious for you, as you look at all the things that have happened, what do you want your legacy to be?
Um, we want change. I want to know. I think the legacy is going to be that we helped other people and we got change so it doesn't happen to anyone else, that we helped get accountability, because what is happening is it, it's not only awful that it happened at the hospital, the place that we trusted, but the ultimate betrayal came after as well, when they denied it and they had it in their hand and they knew what they had done. So we want that change. So that's going to be part of the legacy, in with Reese's Pieces and helping educate other people.
If you had a message for parents who are hearing this, what message you want to give to parents?
What message? You're not alone. Trust that gut, but fight back. I had to learn and maneuver processes that I was never designed to learn. I never needed to know how we really do a law, or who what regulatory committee controls the Department of Humans. I didn't need to know all of that. But I've had to learn that. So just go through it if you have to fight back, and just don't give up. That's what they count on.
Reza, thank you for sharing your story with such honesty and strength. Nicholas's journey is heartbreaking for all of us who are parents, who have kids and loved ones. But your advocacy, I have to say, is really inspiring for me. You've shown us that the system sometimes fails us, but parents can rise in the midst of all that, fight back, and also make a change. So if you'd like to connect with Reza, please give us again your website and how to connect with you on social media so we can stay in touch with your story and tell us how your progress you're making in this fight.
Yep. So reasespieces.com, and you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, all the same, with Fight for Nicholas.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you very much for having us.
Do you know that most entrepreneurs hit a revenue ceiling and have no idea why? They're working harder, spending more money, running more ads, but revenue stays flat. My friend Dr. Noah St. John calls this the invisible break. He's giving our listeners a free revenue ceiling audit to help you see what's really holding you back. You'll get a free 30-day membership to NoahBot, giving you access to Dr. Noah's 30 years of experience to help you reach your next level. But hurry, because there's only 50 available this month. So if you're tired of being stuck at the same revenue level and want to finally break through, get your free revenue ceiling audit at drnoahvault.com in the affiliate link that'll be listed in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter at RevHeadpin. Thanks again, and tune in next time.